Hey Trailblazers and Tarmac Tacklers, welcome back to the Maximum Mileage Running Podcast. This is your one-stop shop for everything ultra, road and trail running.
And don't forget, we've got all your off-road adventures covered too.
And I'm your host, Nick Hancock, Head of Coaching here at Maximum Mileage, here to deliver pro advice, humour and inspiration for those of you tackling marathons and beyond.
And I'm Faye Johnson, your co-host. I am also a certified running coach, personal trainer and the resident mountain goat. Whether it's road running or ultra marathons, we've got the tips and tricks to get you through your training.
Exactly. Whether you are squeezing miles into a busy schedule or just dipping your toes into long distance running, we've got your back. So lace up, gear up and get ready for maximum mileage. Let's get into it. All right, everybody. Welcome to the monthly hot seat with myself. Faye can't make it today because she's with a friend that she hasn't seen in 10 years. Who's over from New Zealand, so they're having a nice chinwag and a beer. And speaking of beer, I'm actually having one myself. Why not? It is a Thursday after all. Thursday's the new Friday, and I'm sat in my camper van because I thought the acoustics would be awesome here because it's all soft furnishings in here. So. Yeah, I'm in my camper van and I've got really good Wi-Fi signal because the Wi-Fi is just inside the house there. Anyway, hope you're all doing well. Thank you for joining, and I will kick things off with. Do you want, Nick? I wanted to talk about DNFs today. Now,
perfect timing.
Yes, and I wanted to talk about it because it's something that a lot of people are afraid to do. Now, in the half marathon world, it's a much rarer occurrence. But in the ultramarathon world, it is part and parcel of the game. It's very rare that you meet an ultra runner who has at least done, a few ultramarathons that hasn't DNF'd. So I wanted to talk about them because, they can be something that people are afraid of. They don't, nobody wants to DNF, but they are part and parcel of the learning process. And it isn't something that, whilst at the time, it can almost feel like the arse of your life has fallen out with disappointment because of it. And I DNF'd twice last year myself. One, I DNF'd at 14 miles. At the time, absolutely distraught by the whole thing. I was pretty annoyed. It was just a poor shoe choice. The arches of the shoes I was running in were digging into me, and I just couldn't run on them anymore. So nothing major. And another one, I was in the lead pack, and we were pushing the pace a little bit, and I slipped on a route and took a bit of a tumble, and my right pinky finger on my right hand was, as I started running off, it was like to the side, sticking out. I was like, oh, fuck, that's not supposed to happen. Popped it back in. And that wasn't the problem. What I realised a couple of miles in, that actually I'd taken a pretty hard hit on my hip and knee, and I just couldn't keep going. So, we do DNF, and then do you know what? A month later, I won an ultramarathon. So, it isn't the be all and end all of an ultra runner's career, and it is part of the learning process. One of the biggest things with running an ultra marathon is actually it's much less, like the marathon and half marathons, where it's a lot about pace and running efficiently and form and all that kind of stuff. That sort of stuff is important in ultra marathons, but actually, success of an ultramarathon is about reducing the amount of things that can go wrong, because there is so many opportunities for things to go wrong. Now, some of those things, like you experienced on the weekend, Nick, you can't control. Like, you can't control picking an ultramarathon that would normally be dry. In fact, we were expecting it to be pretty hot weather with you, and it turned out to be a 6-hour deluge of torrential rain. It was totally unexpected, really, wasn't it?
It wasn't supposed to rain at all. And and it came out of nowhere. Did I send you pictures of what the trail ended up being like from the rain?
You did, yeah. It was
Okay.
like that is the kind those pictures you sent me were the kind of trails we experience here in the autumn, winter, and early spring in the UK, where it's super muddy and boggy. And you just
Yeah, it
wouldn't
was
want to be
rough.
running for 100 miles in those. So yeah, it's running an ultramarathon is about reducing the amount of things that can go wrong. And without those DNFs for our future races, sometimes we don't get to learn what things can go wrong. And some of my best races, which have been recently, have come out of those DNF opportunities. I call them. They are something that we want to do, but we learn so much from them. And I've learned so much from those couple of DNFs I've had, particularly with shoe choice. That is just something you don't want to get wrong in an ultramarathon, and I did it. So now I'm so anal about my shoe choice going into an ultramarathon. Is that if anything that small doesn't feel right about a shoe, I just will not wear it for an ultramarathon now. So yeah, really my sort of message here is not to be too disappointed about a DNF in an ultramarathon. Certainly don't come away from it thinking, oh well, I'm not going to do any ultramarathons ever again because I DNF'd it. Everybody thinks I'm a joke, because really people don't. And I say it is a great opportunity to actually learn from it for your future races. So yeah, the message is don't let DNFs get you down too much. Now I know you, Nick, you weren't disappointed at all, really, were you?
No, it's so this is my first DNF, but as far as the ultramarathon world, I've only done a 50 miler, and then this was a 100 miler. I've done a couple Ironmans last year that I didn't DNF, and I always thought, me being like the stubborn macho guy I guess I am, I would be very very, very angry, and I wasn't. I mean, it was the exact opposite. I was content. I was happy with how far I made it. I made it to mile 89.
Yeah, exactly. You didn't. It's not exactly like you got to mile 10 and were like, "Oh, can't be bothered with this." You really put everything into it, didn't you?
Yeah, I was very content in that I truly gave it everything I had, mentally, physically. I know I could not have went one more step, and that was my brink, and that's what I wanted. Whether it was, I hit my finish line, whether that was 100 miles or whatever. But for me, it was 89 miles that day, and I was very happy with my performance and how far I made it.
Yeah, do you know what? This is the thing, since we've sort of, for the people listening on the podcast later, no, you didn't make it to the 100 miles, but the DNF rate in that, in your race was way over 50%. And of the DNFs, you were way up there. I mean, some people, there were a lot of people that are dropping out at, 10, 20, 30 miles in those first 6 hours, just like, nah, I don't fancy this.
Yeah, I added it up after the race was over and all the results were in. It was a 54% DNF. And it wasn't a small pack. I think it was 284 people that did the 100 miler. Yep. It was 54% of those.
It was a big field.
Didn't finish. Yeah, so it's not like it was, a 20 or 30 person race and it was 50% of that. It was, people were dropping like flies.
Yeah, it was. I'm not surprised. Yeah, just again, I couldn't paint a picture enough with my words to say how bad those photographs were that you sent me.
Yeah.
What you were running, because it was just 100 miles worth of bog.
Mm-hmm.
On a course that you purposely chose because it was supposed to be fast and runnable. It just couldn't have turned out any more opposite to what you were looking for. So, but no, we were talking the other day that you come out this race, and obviously we'll give you a few days to get back on your feet and feel a little bit better, and we'll start looking at challenges again. I'm sure you've already started looking, haven't you? Knowing you.
Yeah, I was doing that on the drive home from my DNF.
There you go. Cool. So that's it. DNFs, they're not that bad. They really aren't. It might feel like your world has ended there and then at the time, but they're really not that bad. Cool. So going right to the other end of the distance and racing spectrum, Andy, who is on the call right now, but he is actually listening while he runs. So he sent me a text ahead of time, and he asked me, because he's got a 10K race on the weekend, and it's his first race of that kind since he did Race to the Stones, which is a very popular ultramarathon here in the UK. It's 100K. It's a ballot system. Yeah, really big race, and he only did that a few weeks ago. And so, turning his attention to marathons in the spring, where he wants to see how fast he can go over the marathon distance on the road. One of the first things that we've started doing is really start working on his baseline pace. And the 10K race he's got this weekend is all about seeing how quick he is at the moment, so we can set his pace zones and his get really sort of dialed in onto his training. So he asks, how would you pace the 10K? And a little bit like a 5K. So you all know that I like giving you 5Ks to test how fast you're running at the moment. The way I personally run a 10K and a 5K is to go out in the first mile or so hard. You don't want to be going out. You don't want to be going out too easy when you're trying to race a 10K. But don't go out mental fast. Don't try and break your 1 mile PB in the first mile. You need to build into that first mile. Get yourself up to a place by the end of the first mile where you are working hard, but you're what I call comfortably uncomfortable. You're right at the top end of your threshold. So settle into that sort of comfortably uncomfortable zone. Get yourself to halfway, assess how you're feeling. Are you still feeling comfortably uncomfortable? If it's too uncomfortable, then you've pushed it a little bit too hard. But 10Ks are hard distances. And particularly, Andy, being the fact that you've just done an ultra marathon, not many ultra runners like running hard. So you will find it uncomfortable. It will be territory that is going to be like, oh God, this is not something I've experienced a lot of. But my advice is, when you get to that halfway point, you assess where you are. It will start to burn. But my advice for the last half of the race is to hang on for dear life. And that's how I run a 10K, because they are hard. It is so much intensity in such a short space of time. Hang on for that last 3 mile, particularly the last mile. But the key thing is that if you have built nicely into that first mile, you've got to that first mile conservatively, what you should have is something left in the tank for a little kick at the end. And that's what you see the pros do. Is, you see Mo Farah, he was amazing at it, one of the best middle distance runners of all time. His 10K kick at the end was so good, and it was because of that saving just a little bit at the start, building nicely into that first mile, that he had a little bit left in the tank just to push it on and finish strong. So that is how I would pace a 10K. Start off nice and conservatively, build into the first mile, get yourself to a place where you're comfortably uncomfortable. And then at around halfway, quick assessment. How am I feeling? Where am I at? How's my form? If you feel like your form's dipping, pick yourself back up, but stay nice and relaxed. A relaxed runner is a faster runner, and push for that last half of the race. It will hurt. It will suck. Just hang on for dear life. All right. Hopefully that helps.
What I found, Nick, because I've never raced a 10K until recently, it was that hardness of the 5K, but you've got time to settle into it. So you've almost got that
Yeah.
a bit of, it's nicer than a 10K in that respect, 5K in that respect, because you can sort of breathe into it almost. But yeah, hard.
Yeah, no, 100%. So like with a 5K, my advice is to, where I say in the 10K to build into that first mile, with a 5K build into the first half a mile, because you don't want to spend too long building into a 5K, because otherwise you've done half the race before you've got up to a pretty hard pace. So that first half a mile is, let all the fast lot go bombing off, because you'll probably overtake them, at halfway, because they've all gone off too fast. But yeah, no, you're right. You do get a little bit more opportunity to build into it. Actually, just looking back on your question here, Andy, would you start off easy and build into it, or would you break it down into sections? Well, yeah, pretty much what I just said. Start off easy, build into that first mile, get yourself up to halfway. That's your second section, and then the last half of the race is hanging on. You also ask about fueling strategies for the shorter but faster stuff. Now, you definitely don't need to be carb loading for a 10K, unless you're, unless you are a 10K runner that's sort of getting into the realms of running an hour and a half at full whack. But no, for most people, you shouldn't need to do any sort of carb loading for a 10K. What I would say though is the day before the race is to make sure that the carbs that you are eating are things like white rice, white bread, that simple broken down carbohydrate. Feel free to add in chocolate, sweets, that kind of stuff that's going to saturate your glycogen store. And then on the day of the race, your normal breakfast, whatever you have, again, try and keep that to something a little bit more simple, like Frosties or what have you got in the US that's sugary cereal? It's all sugary cereal, right, Nick? You're on mute again, dude. You're on mute. Fruit Loops, right?
Sorry
Is it
about
Fruity
that.
Loops? Lucky
Yeah,
Charms?
all our food supply, I think, is all processed garbage compared to you guys. Anything you grab would be sugary junk.
Yeah, I don't know. I grabbed a box of Frosties today and Cocoa Pops because my nutritionist, who I'm going to get on the podcast because he's awesome, Steve Winrow. He's also working with Steve Shaw, who I coach as well, and Steve is feeling pretty awesome. He's a big fan of Frosties, so if Frosties is something that you can handle on the morning of a race, it's pure sugar, pure sugar. They are frosted iced flakes. And then right before the race, what I tend to have is either something fairly sugary snack, or bananas pretty good if you want something in the realms of being healthy. But what we want to be thinking about within that immediacy of the race is performance. Of course, we all need to be healthy, eating whole grains and plenty of fresh fruit and vegetables in general. But around the time of a race, we really need to turn our attention towards performance. And you particularly don't want to be running something like a hard 10K, half marathon, even ultra marathon, with a bunch of fiber in your stomach. It's just going to be really uncomfortable. And again, here we go. Very typical of the maximum mileage monthly hot seat. I'm going to talk about poop, because that is the kind of thing that can happen. You can get really uncomfortable in your stomach if you've got too much fiber in there. So keep it something really simple, something like a 10K. I'll have a gel, literally 20 minutes before the race. Get that gel in me. Make sure my glycogen stores are absolutely as high as they can possibly be. It's also just a little bit of a psychological boost as well for me. And yeah, I'll go and run it hard and empty the tank on the race. That is a fairly similar scenario to how I fuel my training sessions as well, my hard training sessions. So my typical Tuesday and Thursday or Friday hard sessions where I'm doing interval work, speed work, that kind of stuff. In the couple of meals before that session, I'll switch my attention from eating, super healthy, where I'm having all my whole grains and fresh fruit and vegetables and that kind of thing, to focusing much more on performance. So I'll instead of having whole grain rice, I'll have white rice, for example. Instead of having whole grain wraps, I'll have white wraps. I'll have a sugary drink or a sugary snack of some kind before that session. So as I go into that session, my glycogen stores are up and I can focus massively on performance. And then most of the time I'll then refuel after the session with a high carb meal of some kind. So hopefully that helps as well, Andy. Any questions from anybody on the call before we wrap up? And this is going to be a fairly short one today because the last 2 years of the monthly hot seat, I actually cancelled the August ones because it's the school holidays here in the UK and everybody's away. So any questions at all, Rach?
Nope, nothing from me. Thank you very much.
Cool. All right. Well, I will wrap that up today. A short episode, but hopefully there's some nuggets in there for everybody. And thank you very much for joining. And that's another lap done on the Maximum Mileage Running podcast. Thank you for joining me and my athletes and my guests on this wild ride through the world of ultra, road and trail running. And remember, whether it's a mountain trail or the local road, every mile you conquer makes you stronger. Keep pushing, keep laughing, and of course, keep swearing when that hill just seemed a little too steep. If you enjoyed today's journey, don't forget to subscribe and leave me a nice review. Your feedback does help me go that extra mile. Until next time, this is your host, Nick Hancock, reminding you to make every mile count. Run long, run strong, and run with maximum mileage. Catch you on the next run.